Glad to see all you young people.
Thank you.
Okay.
Will take.
All of my work, whether teaching in a university or doing therapy or consulting, I always look at everything within the larger context of ministry, because it's ultimately about helping people to move closer to their understanding of themselves in their relationship with God. I even have a lot of students. Do you know that I have graduated, been advisor to almost 50 PhD students?
Yeah.
I've been doing this a long time, that are psychologists out there. So I am a professor. I teach in the PhD program in counseling psychology. I train psychologists. And so people ask me, what do I do? Well, I make up stuff and the students believe me. And then, so that's the professor part. But then if you ask me, so in my family, I'm the psychologist and my wife is the therapist. So what that means is, if you want to be analyzed, you come and see me. If you want help, you go and see Eric. All right, so Chris asked me, I think it was Becky, or the two of you asked me something about dealing with habits. So we're going to work with the topic today, changing self-defeating habits. Back in the day, okay, when I was quite a bit younger, okay, you see that toilet there, okay. One day well, it was for a few days, and I was teaching in Indiana University, and I got quite sick. I had a fever, temperature, so I stayed home for at least several days, okay. And I guess I was a little bit delirious. And I flushed my underwear down the toilet. That was a one-off behavior. I've never done the likes of that since. Now, just pause for a minute. Each and every one of you has a one-off. If the truth were told, we all have one-off behavior, something we've done that we never repeated. But it was something that we wouldn't exactly be proud of, we wouldn't want to revisit it, and it has some consequences. We're not talking about one-off behaviors. We're talking about something consistent. We're talking about getting beyond being stuck on stupid. So here's a real client that I had in my private practice some time ago. So we're going to call her the Presbyterian puppy. You'll understand why. Okay. And she was a hot mess. Here were her presenting complaints: depression, anxiety, and marital conflicts. You know, clients come in, they fill out the paper. This is the things that they want to work on. There's some demographics about her. She was white, middle class, married, a minister's wife, no children, college educated, 30-something, highly professional. She's in the communication field, very articulate. Okay. If you would encounter her in public place, in public spaces, or anywhere, you would say, oh, this is a woman that's polished and got it together. Well, I was teaching at the Fuller Theological Seminary at the time, the graduate school of psychology, and that's how I met her. And she was married to the Right Reverend, and they were Presbyterian. When out in California, the criteria for becoming a Presbyterian pastor in California is that, especially in the Los Angeles area, you have to be tall, dark, and handsome. If you got that going for you, then you can become a minister in the Presbyterian church. Okay? So, Lloyd Ogilvie and the likes, there were a lot like that out there. And so they they were married. Okay. But here's an issue. The Right Reverend was abusive. Okay. This was no play matter. In public, there was one thing. In private, something else was going on. So, now it would be easy to overlook the abuse of the husband. And he was truly abusive. If you were a member of the church, if you were in their faith community, you would not have thought it. But what I learned behind closed doors was the dialogical opposite to the public presentation, to the public image. Now, you might say, okay, Dr. Ridley, so why are you picking on the client? She comes to you because she's depressed, she's anxious, she's uptight, she's in marital conflict. And lo and behold, you do your thematic mapping and you say, Houston, we got a problem. That you are a problem. Now, is this the kind of shrink you want to go to? You're getting beat up by your husband and then he tells you that you're a problem? Well, let's examine this. She had a self-defeating habit. She played the victim. She accepted his excuses. And she faked marital bliss. What do I mean by that? In his abusiveness, she was complicit. She went along with the program. She didn't fight back. She didn't assert herself. When it came to after events occurred, he would be apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. And excuse after excuse. And she routinely, religiously accepted the excuses. And on top of all that, she went out of her way to give the appearance, or should I say the illusion in the public, that all was well. She faked marital bliss. Houston, we got a problem. This is what she did. Now, there are three important questions we need to ask ourselves. Those questions are what, why, and how. What was the nature of her habit? Why was she engaged in that habit? And how did she behave in that way? The what is playing the victim, accepting his excuses, and faking marital bliss. That is behavioral. That's what she did. Let me get a little bit technical on you. That's psychomotor activity. If you swing a golf club, that's your behavior. If you drive your vehicle to this meeting, that's human behavior. If you kiss your spouse, that's human behavior. Human behavior like that is associated with the central nervous system. And what that means is you have a choice. We have a choice in the behaviors that we engage in. They're not thrust upon us. Nobody's holding an Uzi up to our head and say, you behave this way. That's a choice that we make. So, the what is, there are behaviors that this client engages in. The why. Why would she do such a thing? Why would she comply with her husband beating her up? How about because she benefits from it? How about because she gets something out of her husband being abusive? And you can say, well, that is really strange. That is really odd. What in the world could she possibly get out of the abusiveness of her husband? What could she get out of playing along with it? Glad you asked. That's the how. The how are secondary gains. Now, while we talked about the what as being behavioral, which is associated with the central nervous system, meaning we have a choice, the how is emotional, and that is associated with the autonomic nervous system. We don't have a choice in how we feel. Now, we do have a choice in what we do with our feelings, with our behavior, but she didn't have a choice but to feel threatened, to feel overwhelmed. And she takes it a step further. There's this thing called secondary gains. And since we're in the facility of a medicine man, I thought it would be good that with somebody in his profession, Sigmund Freud, he started out treating patients just as Dr. Imperial treats patients. And he determined that many of his patients, that the physical symptoms that they were showing were really related to some kind of psychological issues that were going on with them. Aversion reactions. So a specific physical ailment, he tried to tie it to what was going on with them psychologically. And one of the concepts he came up with is called secondary gains. Let me read from you one modern psychologist that gives a description, and I want you to hear what she has to say because she's on point. Secondary gain is an invisible force that keeps us stuck on stupid, in unhealthy patterns. Secondary gains means that we have learned to get some benefit from our problems. Basically, sometimes we get into a habit of being defined by our problems. They become like a comfortable pair of shoes. Or we learn that our problems help us gain attention from people in our worlds, whether positive or negative. We can therefore stop wanting to help ourselves. We choose this stagnant way of living rather than finding recovery and growth. While we may verbally complain, our actions say that we are strangely content and comfortable with sitting in our own mess. I'm going to skip down to the last few sentences. Secondary gain is the hidden force that sabotages us and makes us resistant to change and growth. We usually have no idea that this is going on in this situation. If we had a magical being to fix our problems, we might not take it because it would mean losing the secondary gains that we get from our problems. If secondary gains is sabotaging our chances of making positive change, we need to recognize it so that we can undo its influence. So, my client, I had the audacity, I had the timidity, no, I had the unmitigated gall to ask her, what did she get out of being complicit with her husband? And guess what kind of response I got? Rage, anger. Dr. Ridley, you ought to be confronting him. He's the one that's abusive. Dr. Ridley, he's the one that takes it out on me. The reason I came here was for help and support. And here you are putting it on me, blaming me. I said, yes. I catalyzed her. And I kept on pressing. Now, understanding how therapeutic change is a process, we did not arrive at an answer in one cup. It didn't take 1 or 2 sessions. But over a period of time, remember, secondary gains are a hidden force. And this is what I learned. deep down inside of her, she had a threat of divorce. She had a need to protect the public image, and she tried to fight off her husband's criticism of their sexuality. Those are three potent things, three potent dynamics that help to keep her in this behavior pattern. Because if you play the victim, if you accept excuses, if you continue and support his behavior and try to make it as though everything is all well, then you really don't have to look at deep down inside how you're hurting behind the possible threat of a divorce, behind criticisms of sexuality, and oh my goodness, who would want in the faith community to know that all is not well? Those are things that she sought to protect. Well, look at the consequences. There are a slew of consequences. There's depression, or anxiety, being complicit with the abuse, social isolation. She kind of removed herself from her friends and people in her faith community, postponed having children. We're not going to bring children into this rocky mess. Job performance was going down. Financial costs were starting to take time off from work, marital conflicts, sexual dysfunction, and any leisure time was always miserable. Let's look at 10 implications. Number one, I had to forge the issue of her looking into the psychological mirror. We all look at the mirrors when we groom in the morning and get ourselves ready for the day. That's the physical mirror. She had to look into the psychological mirror. And if she never would come to terms with the fact that she plays the role of the Presbyterian puppy, that's the real her. That's not the wannabe, that's the real her. Until she internalizes that, she is never going to change to become something other than a Presbyterian puppy playing the victim role. Implication number one, we have to look at ourselves in the psychological mirror. Implication number two, we got to help people to get a holistic view, a holistic picture of themselves. And so what we have here, there's aspects of this picture of her that was about her behavior, there's aspects that were emotional, there are aspects that were cognitive about how she thought, there were aspects about relationships, there were physical. I mean, she was losing weight. There was her whole values and beliefs, all this big ball of wax. Everything about who she is was implicated in being a Presbyterian puppy. Now here's the moral to that story. If we want to change, if we want to help other people change, we can't partition people out in just in these segments. We've got to embrace the entirety of who we are as human beings to be part and parcel of significant change. Number three, it's what I like to call the cost-benefit ratio. being a Presbyterian puppy, I like to say, is an expensive habit. We know about people that were on drugs and alcohol abuse and how quite expensive that is. Well, whatever our self-defeating habit is, it can be quite costly. Now, let's look at how the costs outweigh the benefits for her. So on the left-hand side, the benefits were that the threat of divorce, protecting her public image, and evading criticism about sexuality from her husband. That was the benefit. So by keeping this expensive habit, this is what she got out of it. She really didn't have to, it never came to light in their faith community and in the public that things were not all well in Houston. So she did get something out of it. Now, just numerically, look at how we have 3 benefits on the left-hand side, and look how we have 10 consequences or costs on the other side. That's just from a numerical perspective, 3 to 10. So the odds certainly are in favor of this being non-beneficial to her because the costs outweigh. But that's only if we looked at it numerically. But what if we looked at it qualitatively and emotionally? There is no comparison. The price that she had to pay emotionally far outweighs the benefits she got. You see the cost benefit ratio. I like to call this the Esau principle. Essentially, what we do is we sell our birthright for a pottage of stew. We give away what is rightly ours, which is endowed by God. We give it away on the altar of secondary gain. The things that we are protecting that really don't enable us to live the kind of wholesome, healthy, and rich lives that God would have us to live. She sold her birthright. And that's what people do. Implication number 4. I call this visualization. Okay, so on the right-hand side, we have the observable behavior. Playing the victim, accepting his excuses, and faking marital bliss. That's psychomotor activity. That's something she does. And we can actually see her, if we were in the space, we could see her making excuses. We could see her doing the different things that go along with the program. We can readily observe that. That is observable. That's one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, the secondary gains are unobservable. We can't see them. As a clinician, when I begin to work with a client, I do not immediately know what is on the left-hand side of the equation. We've got to figure it out. And then you begin to learn when you keep pressing. When she has a slip of tongue, what are the people at church going to think? Oh, now I've been working with you for the past 4 weeks. Now you let something slip. So what does this have to do? What does your behavior have to do with the people in the church and what they think? I think I stepped on something. Can you kind of see how over time, if you keep working with it and pressing, a good clinician is going to get to the unobservable. So the point here is, the visualization is both what is seen and what is unseen. You see the behavior, you can see the behavior stuff. You cannot see the secondary gains. You cannot see the benefits, but those benefits are just as critical to the dysfunctional pattern as what is observed. We got 6 more implications. Hold on to your seats. Buckle up. Core emotions. You know, we talk a lot about anger in our society, and certainly psychology talks a lot about, psychologists talk about anger. I want to propose to you that although there's a lot of anger running around and people behave out of anger, I think that there's something more foundational in a lot of our problems, and that's fear and hatred. And what is fear? Fear is an emotion of dread. That's fear. You dread being harmed. Hatred is the wish that the object of hate to not exist. Aristotle said that anger heals with time, but hatred doesn't heal. And I believe, and that was his perspective, I believe is God has got to help us to heal from the hatred. Now, what does Jesus say? If you have hatred in your heart, you just as well have committed murder. Can you see the cause and effect relationship? The thing that you hate is what you wish to not exist. So, threat of divorce, protecting the public image, and the criticism of sexuality, she both feared and hated those 3 things. And therefore, this is what she did. The fear, she would run away from it. The hatred, she would seek to destroy it. How? By playing the victim role, by accepting his excuses, by faking marital belief. You see what our bad habits do? Now, she should be afraid. Let's talk about the good news. She should be afraid. She should hate the criticism. She should both fear and hate. Hate and fear. But we got to understand what our fears and hatred are, and nevertheless still do the right thing. See, the goal is not to get rid of our fears. The goal is not to automatically stop hating. The goal is to do something constructive with our lives despite our fears, despite the things that we hate. We are called upon to live holy lives and righteous lives and healthy lives, not in the absence of fear, not in the absence of things that we just really despise. Who would like stepping on a nail? Sure, you hate that. You should hate it. We're wired through the autonomic nervous system. The point is not to fear or not to fear, to hate or not to. The point is to live in a righteous, holy, and healthy manner. We're halfway through the implications. How about number 6? So she came to therapy out of anxiety, the depression, and the marital conflict. Those were not a problem. They were part of the problem, but they were the consequences. And if you start the treatment by focusing only on anxiety and only on the depression, this is what you miss. the big picture of the Presbyterian puppy. See, her problem was not just this, and this. Notice how those are consequences. They are lagging indicators. They come after the fact. And so if you direct your treatment to try to deal just with those three things, you miss the big picture of all this other stuff that is going on with her. Sure, we can give her some psychotropic medications. There's medications for anxiety and depression that can provide some help and some relief. But as a therapist, I'm interested in helping her to change, to fundamentally change the way she deals with it. So, while she came in with the complaints of depression, anxiety, and marital conflict, note how those are really consequences, lagging indicators, not leading indicators, after the fact. So, what we have to do is we have to reframe the presenting problem. The definition of the problem has to be refocused and rechanged and changed. And one of the things I spend, that I emphasize a lot with the students that I train, and we have a clinic, in fact, one of our clinics is right across the street, telehealth, that when you work with clients, what they come and present, I don't want you to immediately begin to treat that. I want you to get a more comprehensive, in-depth understanding of the client so that we can treat them holistically. Therefore, we change from the symptoms of anxiety, depression, marital conflict, to dysfunctional patterns as being the problem. Sort of like this. You see on the left-hand side, we have depression, we have anxiety, and we have marital conflict. We change from that to a self-defeating habit. Playing the victim, accepting his excuses, and faking marital bliss. Our 8th point here, hidden in plain sight. Is there anything in that picture that you see that you don't see?
It's causing the tree to bend over.
The tree is bent over, okay?
But it's causing it to be.
What's causing it to be bent over? Okay. Somebody else?
There's a roadway there.
Hmm?
There's a roadway.
A roadway? Okay. Anything else?
Looks like a broken tree there in the middle, looks like it's
This here? Broken
No,
tree?
over,
there,
middle,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, okay, a broken tree.
yes.
Okay.
What is that black thing?
I so badly want to give you all an A for the day now. But let me tell you what's in there that I draw your attention. I know you're sitting away from it. But here's the point I want to make. This is a giraffe.
A what?
It's a giraffe.
This is a giraffe.
Sure, he's got a skinny
Couldn't
neck.
prove it from here.
Now, I understand that you're sitting in the back of the individual. But the point is, even if you were sitting on up front, there are people that don't get it. So here's what I want you to understand. You see it, but you don't see it. You don't see it, but you see it. Self-defeating habits can be right in front of us, in full view, but we don't see them. name them for what they really are. Oh, that's just the way he is. Oh, you just got to understand her. And we dismiss something that is very much wrong in the way the person is living his life or her life. Much of the self-defeating habits, the dysfunctionality is in full view, and we overlook it. We dismiss it summarily. Dr. Tony Evans, who's minister up in the Dallas area, says something like this: if all you see is what you see, then all you see is not all you should see. So, what we need to see is the big picture. What a colleague of mine years ago used to call big pictureitis. The big picture is not the depression and anxiety and marital conflict. The big picture incorporates all of the behaviors that are dysfunctional. It incorporates the secondary gains, which are the causes, and it incorporates the consequences. We need big picture-itis, a comprehensive view, in order for us to change and help other people change. So let's say something about the characteristics of the habit. It's pattern behavior. It's something that is done repetitiously. It's done over and over and over again, day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, year in and year out. It's as a pattern. This tells you something. You can make a prediction of what is likely to happen next week, this afternoon, and next year, because it's a well-established pattern. A pattern, by definition, is repetitious. It's self-defeating. We are our own worst enemy. With enemies like ourselves, who needs the other enemies out there? Look at the things that we do to ourselves. It's self-chosen. Remember we talked about earlier that our behavior is associated with the central nervous system. You know, that's the brain, the spinal cord that runs through. We have a choice. We have a choice in the way we behave. You had a choice to come here or not come here today. You had a choice to sit here and listen to me. You could have thrown popcorn at me. Sit down and shut up. But you didn't. You had a choice. It's self-reinforcing. The more you engage in that behavior and get the secondary gains from it, it works like a charm. If the fact that you don't have to hear criticism about your sexuality because you're playing the victim role, it works. You get reinforced for doing it. So you're more likely to continue working in that pattern. If you spare yourself of a tarnished reputation in your faith community, why not play the victim? You get rewarded for it. It's pain avoidant. We talked about fear. You're running away from the possibility of being exposed, of being criticized, getting a divorce. We take off running. And it's indiscriminate. Okay, so the person doesn't distinguish. If there's a tiger that happens to escape from the Houston Zoo and we see running around out there, we're going to take off running. But if you got to go to Dr. Imperial for a needle, like my wife who has a PhD she hates getting needles, and she would do anything possible not to have to come and see you, okay? And I gotta drag her, okay? Notice that the issue is pain, and it doesn't discriminate whether it's a healthy stimulus or unhealthy stimulus. It's just about pain. So we're gonna take off running. It is indiscriminate. Our self-defeating behavior means that we don't sit down and say, you know what? I really don't like how I feel about this. But you know, I gotta do something responsible in my relationship anyway. It's threatening, difficult conversations, may have to do something different, doesn't make me feel good. That's discrimination. Number 10. In order for the Presbyterian puppy to change, she literally has to make, she's going in this direction, she's got to make a 180-degree turn. Not 120 degrees, not a 60 degree, but a 180-degree turn whereby she's moving from being this passive puppy to asserting herself. And so in therapy, we teach responsible ways in how to assert yourself to deal with the conflicts and difficulties in your relationships and in life in general. Anything short of a 180-degree turn, anything short of that is non-therapeutic. 160 doesn't do it. So I give assignments to clients that I work with, and this is what I teach students as well. And students and clients are responsible on a weekly basis to begin to make incremental changes in their lives. So, I'm reminded of what we recently celebrated his birthday. When they had to march to Montgomery, Dr. King said, how long? Not long. Because truth crushed to earth shall rise again. How long? Not long. Because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. How long? Not long. Because you reap what you sow. How long? Not long. Truth forever on the scaffold. Wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future. Standing behind them in the dark unknown. Standeth God within the shadow. Keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. His truth is marching on. If there's any moral to living a wholesome, healthy life, it is about living truthfully under the authority and grace of God. So, those are the things that I wanted to share with you. Do you have questions or comments? Yes, sir.
It seems like a lot of us, I'm speaking of myself, you learn early how to try to avoid conflict, or you don't want to upset somebody, or you don't want to ever be wrong. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes we're wrong, but it's hard to admit we're wrong. And as far as changing behavior, we tend to do something because that's what I've always done. And so I think that's where prayer for me comes in, and prayer, God, help me to think another way about certain situations.
So Dr. Roy, how come the Prince of Peace got violent in the temple?
Great point. Because he wanted to make changes.
He wanted to make changes and he wanted to stand against injustice and the denigration of his holy place
That's right, exactly.
and the abuse of the poor people being taken advantage by the religious authority. How come he took a stand?
It had to be a very violent kind of stand to get the attention
Exactly.
of his own.
Yes.
So you
It
took us
wasn't
through
one
the
they
Presbyterian puppies, story. What was the outcome?
So I saw this client when I was a professor at the graduate school of psychology at Fuller Theological Seminary. This was some time ago. Several years ago, now I've been away from Fuller for a number of years. I left Fuller and I went to Indiana University, and then I spent some years at Indiana University before I came to A&M. And I had not had contact. Several summers ago, I received an email from this client. She said, Dr. Ridley, I want to thank you for the time we spent together. I've done well in my life since that time. And I just want you to know I looked you up and found you. And I appreciate what happened. There was a positive therapeutic outcome. Oh, we did some tussling in therapy, believe me. We battled. Okay. But I'm thankful for the outcome. Does that answer your question?
But it's interesting, all my life, I was brought up in Ohio. Let sleeping dogs lie, don't rock the boat, don't, just put up with, as far as trying to augment change.
And when we allow sleeping dogs to lie, when we don't rock the boat, when we brush it under the cover, we are complicit. We are tacitly saying, this is okay.
True.
And it's not.
This will be a short question, but I'm sure that you
No,
will be really long.
I
Is
want,
it possible to change without being analyzed and receiving therapeutic intervention?
well, I think many of us need help in various aspects of our lives, so, I have a tax attorney that's working with me on some stuff, okay? Now, I can't do it by myself, and I've made some financial mistakes. I got a tax attorney that is working with me, so I think it's fair if you have a legitimate therapist. But I'm gonna say this as an insider, that not all therapists are created equal.
Yeah.
Amen.
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
I was kind of wondering, how much, for example, in a situation like what you presented, you may have understood what was going on in the situation well before she did.
Well,
Just
you know
because
what?
of the situation.
Well, here's what I understood. I understood that there were some unobservables, that there were some secondary gains. I didn't know any more about them than she was consciously aware of. But I do know that there was stuff in the background. And so I keep working with it, and we sort of, one of the things I like when working with clients are those aha moments. It's those moments when it hits them between the eyes. And it's sort of like a shock and a stare, and I allow, and I sit with it. I allow it to be a pause, I allow it to be quiet, so they can reflect and ponder on it before we pick it up again. And I love those moments. They are very therapeutic. That's about looking ourselves in the psychological mirror and seeing something that we really didn't see clearly before. Now we can begin to address it. Okay, so now let's talk about, what do you mean your friends will know about this? What does that really mean? Now we begin to dig deep into it.
And how much can you push that a little bit? Like, people in your position often have to put on a persona for the congregation. Could you push that in a client relationship, or you wait for it to expose itself?
So what is the it that you're talking about being exposed? Are you talking about being able to talk about it in therapy, or for it to be public broadcast in the church?
The fear of being exposed to the congregation, that things aren't working out
Okay,
well.
okay.
The
So,
guidance that you could give,
okay.
and maybe cut down the sessions from how many sessions before you really get.
But that's not necessary. That does not have to be necessary, because my aim is to help facilitate healing and wholeness in her and in her marriage, so that it doesn't have to come to that. Now, there are times when, relationships break up. There are, that happens. But I want to work with my client to be wholesome and healthy as much as possible, so it does not have to come to that. You do that problem solving later on.
An interesting case.
So this is a method of case conceptualization that I developed. It's called thematic mapping. I didn't give you a lot of the background of how you do it, but this is what I want my students to be able to do, is to get a very in-depth and comprehensive picture of their clients, so that they can help them to engage in the right kind of change processes.
Well, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, Dr. Ridley. Appreciate that.